Hi class. So this lecture is going to be on something called the cell cycle. Most of this chapter we're dealing with something called mitosis, and then I'm actually going to go ahead and do meiosis, which technically in our book is in the next chapter, but I'm going to do them together this week, mitosis and meiosis. But those are both parts of something bigger, and that bigger is this cell cycle. Right? So in the cell cycle, just kind of think of this as the life cycle of a cell. Right? So we can make cells in the body. We make new cells in your body. And when those cells are first developed, they're at the beginning of this cell cycle, and then they can progress through it. Okay, so life cycle of the cell, step after step after step. Okay, and there are 3 steps. The first part of the cell cycle is called interphase. The prefix inter means between. So this is a phase that basically it's defined as being between divisions, right? So we use the cell cycle to divide a cell. So the interphase is something that's between those divisions. Hey, and interphase is basically going to have a couple of things happening. It's going to have cell growth. So this would be things like making proteins. The cell makes a lot of proteins, making copies of organelles, like building more mitochondria and more rough ER and more Golgi complexes, things like that. So general cell growth. And then this is where we're also going to copy the DNA. So in the last lecture, we talked a little bit about what it looks like when we copy the DNA and what the chromosomes are going to look like. So this is the step where we're copying the DNA. Hey, this interphase is about 90% of the whole entire cell cycle, right? So often we see the cell cycle as a pie chart, and we see this little tiny wedge like this, and all of this that I'm kind of coloring in red, all of that is interphase. So the last 2 parts of this cell cycle don't take very long. Interphase is 90% of everything that's going on. All right, so we got to do interphase, and then we have to do mitosis or meiosis. Okay, mitosis or meiosis. The or there is extremely important, like we're not doing both. So mitosis or meiosis after interphase. And this is going to be our way of separating copies of DNA. Right? We said up here we're going to copy the DNA. So now once we've copied the DNA down in mitosis or meiosis, we're going to be separating those copies, right? Because we don't want all those copies in our original cell. Extra copies of DNA means extra copies of chromosomes, and that's typically not good for cells. All right, so mitosis, meiosis, and teaching biology, it's so funny because a lot of times people will teach, especially like in a high school class, people will teach that cell division, like the whole cell dividing. So for example, this little picture I'm putting on the right, some people will teach that that picture is mitosis, and that's actually wrong, because mitosis is literally what I'm telling you here. It's not separating a cell, it's separating copies of DNA. So anytime that I am asking you, what's mitosis for? What's meiosis for? We should be thinking separating copies of DNA. Hey, now eventually we're going to talk about like what would your body use mitosis for? Like why would cells in your body be doing mitosis or meiosis? So we're eventually going to talk about that, but if you're just taking the process by itself, mitosis, what's it for? Separating copies of DNA. right? And then the last part of our cell cycle, it's got kind of a fancy name. It's called cytokinesis. All right, cyto, the prefix cyto means cell, and kinesis means splitting. So cytokinesis is where we're actually physically splitting the cell. All right, so what it does, the way of describing it is we're going to say it splits the cytoplasm. Right, so that's actually what's taking one individual cell and splitting it into two. You know, if we stop, so I'm going to show you on the left here in orange. If we have this cell and it goes through interphase, it still looks like this. There's stuff going on inside that I'm not showing you, but it still just looks like that. It's still a single cell. That goes through mitosis or meiosis, it still looks like that. Right? So we started with this cell on top. Now we've done interphase and mitosis or meiosis. It still looks like this. So it's not till we get to cytokinesis where we're doing that split into two idea. Right? So that's kind of the correction of this thing over here I showed you on the right, where everybody wants to say this is mitosis. It's mitosis is to make cells, and it's just not right. The cell cycle is to make cells, and mitosis can be part of that, but cytokinesis is where we're actually literally splitting. All right, so that's our basic cell cycle: interphase, then mitosis or meiosis, and then cytokinesis. Now, I want to show you one other thing with this cell cycle thing, because cells, if you think about like cells in your body, most cells in your body aren't doing this over and over and over again, right? So I'm going to show you what most cells in your body are doing. Okay, we've got our 3 steps: interphase, mitosis or meiosis, cytokinesis. There's our 3 steps. Now, most cells in your body are going to do this. They're going to go through interphase, they're going to get part of the way through interphase, and then they're going to exit the cell cycle. So they're never going to do mitosis, meiosis, or cytokinesis. They do part of interphase. They don't even copy DNA in interphase, so they just do the cell growth part of interphase, and then they exit the cell cycle. And then that's where they remain for their entire life. This is not reversible. If a cell comes out of the cycle, it can't go back in. All right, and that's what we see with most cells, because most places in our body we don't need to keep making cells constantly all day long. Sometimes we do, like in your skin, in the epidermis of your skin, those cells die, they fall off, we got to replace them. So the bottom of the epidermis of our skin has a layer of cells that's doing this cell division idea, right? It's doing this stuff constantly, making more cells and pushing them up, right? So it can exit. That's what most cells do. Some interphase, exit the cycle, and I'll show you because you're probably going to see this in the book and with reading stuff. So this is it's a weird stage. It's called G0. So that's a 0, G-O. G0 is what most cells in your body are in. Once they leave interphase, they're just out of the cycle and they can't do anything else in the cycle.